the strongest candidate, as far as I can tell, produces the least objectionable candidate for most people. Look at step one. Unless they're rank ordering these people, which I don't think they are.
Oh, this is for what we do. Right.
Well, my feeling was, we have so many people in town interested in this, why don't we? This is some plan they got from St. Leon.
Well, unfortunately, part is that date of the 7th.
Right, yeah. Right, and if we can't figure it out this year, which is what day? The 7th? July? Yeah. It doesn't give much time for the coming year. I don't know how we change it at this point. See, basically,
This is per council member.
and each council member, there's 4 of us, each of us throws 3 into the pot. There's 12 names in the pot, it can be multiple. So one person could be a third choice of 4 people. That's the person who wins. In other words, this is a system that favors the least objectionable candidate.
We have to acknowledge it's happening first, eventually, but it's not till next Monday.
Yeah, sometime. I can understand.
No, conversation. Which was surprising, but not long.
So, yeah, so,
No, I think
anyway, I should study the numbers. But yeah, let's just keep in touch on it, see what you think tonight.
Yeah, we want to talk to this one. We had a meeting.
Oh. Okay. They seem good, they seem like it's Kevin's a great guy.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Albany Municipal Services Joint Powers Authority and the Albany City Council for June 16th, 2014. Please join Shelley Putzer in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
roll call. Councilmember Atkinson?
Present.
Councilmember Barnes?
Present.
Councilmember Moss?
Is excused.
Oh, excuse. Vice Mayor Weil?
Here. We did not have a closed session. And consent calendar, any items people would like to have pulled? Not really. Okay, from the public? Okay, is there, okay. All right, do you want to come to the podium and speak about that?
Hi, Alan Eckert, Albany resident. Let's see, establishing rules for the November 4th, 2014 election. I would just recommend that to make things clear, that there be some kind of amendment to the resolution that this does not apply to the current open seat election. Instead of trying to weave into changing line by line for this one, and then hopefully at the next meeting establish its own clear set of rules for the election for that seat. And most of it can be copy and pasted just to make sure one says these are the general ones, because there's term limits and there's incumbent seating lines in there. I think that would make it the easiest and clearest.
Do you want to clarify?
If I understand you correctly, you want it clarified about the fact that we'll have a 2-year seat and we'll have 2 4-year seats. Is that correct?
Yes, just to just say these rules don't apply to that 2-year seat, and just establish its own set of rules to be approved the next time around for that seat, just
Okay.
to make it clear for tonight so we can get this going and started, because most of everything else is just the same stuff as before.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion?
This is for the consent calendar.
Second.
Want to poll the council?
Councilmember Atkinson?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Weil?
Yes. Consent calendar is approved. Next item.
Good of the City Public Forum announcement. For person desiring to address the City Council on an item that's not on the agenda, please note that city policy limits each speaker up to 3 minutes. The mayor may reduce the time limit per speaker depending on the number of speakers. The Brown Act limits the council's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda.
I'm Bob Hammer, 745 Pierce Street. I want to bring to the council's and to the staff attention that the vegetation that's growing up along Pierce Street parcel, which is like 4.5 acres, is getting quite tall and very dry. In fact, I walked along the fence today, and some of it exceeds the height of the 6-foot fence. Some of the vegetation there is very dry, so I think it could be considered a fire hazard and should be looked into, perhaps mowed down. And the other thing I'd like to bring to your attention is it's been almost 25 years since the first meetings of Caltrans on that property in 1991, which I attended, along I think with at least one other person here and probably a couple of people in the audience. So I'd like to see the Pierce Street Park move forward as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers?
Stuart Gooderman.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stuart Gooderman. I live on the 400 block of Evelyn. Been a resident there since 2006. It has come to my attention that the project of the residential project at El Cerrito Plaza has been revived and is on track to be started relatively soon. The plans of that project, whether it be condos or apartments, they're still not sure at this point, is such that the garage, one of the two garages, is going to face Evelyn Avenue, which means that traffic is going to be coming down Evelyn into the plaza in order for all the residents there to park their cars in that newly found structure. We have been told by some of the students, or one of the students at one of the Albany schools, that the traffic now coming down Brighton is such that children are afraid to cross that street because of the traffic. When this project comes about, the traffic situation is going to get far worse in that area than it is now. And so all the children that live in Albany who attend these schools are going to be converging on that area with all these cars. This is going to represent a hazard for most of these kids. A lot of cars right now come down that street very quickly. They don't stop. They don't look. So I would like the board to start looking into this project. It was on hiatus because of the recession. It has now been revived. There's a new person who's taken over the project, and he is going gung-ho. So we may, the council may need to either talk to the city of El Cerrito, to this project manager, or whatever, in order to find out what is going on and how this is going to affect the neighborhood around El Cerrito. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Okay. Next item.
Public hearing, resolution number 2014-51 to adopt a revised master fee schedule. Staff recommendation that the City Council adopt resolution number 2014-51, a resolution of the Albany City Council establishing and amending the City of Albany master fee schedule for various permits, services, and fines effective July 1st, 2014.
Good evening, members of the City Council. My name is Tina McKinney, and I'm the Finance Director. This item that I am bringing forth is part of the normal annual process, the intent being to make periodic incremental adjustments to fees to ensure that the city is recovering the cost of providing services, which in turn keep the city services fiscally sustainable. The process used was adopted by the City Council in 2002 and authorized an annual cost of living adjustment to the fees each year thereafter. The master fee schedule provides a consolidation of the various fees into a single document. Factors considered when preparing the document include staff time required to provide the services, as well as other costs of providing the service. Some specialized fees, such as building permits, are linked to building valuation data of the cost of construction indexes. Some fees, such as the tobacco retailer fee, are specified in the municipal code and do not automatically change. One additional factor to note is the maximum on any general adjustment for the period used was limited to the changes in CPI of 2.2%. Finally, a draft of the proposed master fee schedule was posted to the city's website on June 6, 2014, and as such, staff is recommending that you conduct the public hearing and adopt the proposed resolution. That concludes my report, and I am happy to answer any questions regarding this matter. Thank you.
Okay. Questions from the City Council?
Just a quick one. It's my understanding that if the cap for that, we can raise the fees is, say, 2.2%, that if we go under that, we don't lose that ability. We can actually, it's not a use or lose situation. If it was 2.2% for 2 years, that would be 4.4, and we could catch up in the next time period.
What I understand is that we look at it from December, in this case, it was December of 2012 to 2013, so it adjusts yearly. The max was 2.2, so we can go, the max is the 2.2. So we use that basis to determine each year, depending on what the CPI is.
I'm not sure, there can be a catch-up by the way that it's written. So if it's 2.4, several of these didn't increase by that 2.2 this year. If the cost of living increase goes up by, say, 2.2 again next year, we couldn't do a 4.4, we could do a 2.2.
So there isn't a catch-up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the way it was, the intent of the way it was written for 2002. Yeah, I can double check on that for you, but I think the intent was not to be able to catch up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Members of the public, questions, comments?
Hi, Amber Whitson, Albany resident. I was just wondering if maybe staff or somebody could answer me here or by email as to the purpose of increasing the fines for violations of Albany Municipal Code 8-4 point anything from $161 per violation to $100 for the first violation, $200 for the second violation, and $500 for the third violation. I'm just wondering if you guys think that you're going to squeeze blood out of a turnip, or if you think that suddenly the homeless people in Albany are richer, or if you think you can punish them more than already finding the money that they don't have by finding them more money that they don't have. I was just wondering if staff or anybody could answer me that question, because it just seems kind of irrational and illogical of all the fines and fees you could increase. Those that are enacted upon homeless people seem to be not the most reasonable ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person.
I'm sorry, I don't have all the numbers in my mind the way that Amber does, but I also want to object to the fees increase. I'm not really clear on why that's happening also. I'm not sure if you're thinking that it's a deterrent or you're thinking it's a good way to make money. It seems not like a very good way to make money. Sometimes I wonder if some of the things you do just because you can do it and not because there's a good reason that really makes sense for the benefit of the entire community. So I really hope that you will revisit that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Back to the council.
So I will recommend that the council adopt resolution number 2014-51 A resolution of the Albany City Council establishing and amending the City of Albany master fee schedule for various permits, services, and fines effective July 1st, 2014. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Atkinson,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Weil.
Yes.
Next item, affirmation of mayor and nomination and election of vice mayor. Staff recommendation that the City Council affirm Vice Mayor Joanne Weil to continue to serve as mayor and nominate and elect a member of the City Council to the position of vice mayor.
Discussion by the City Council?
Do you know if Pete's interested in being the new vice mayor? Did he make any indication?
I recommend that you go ahead and affirm the mayor first, and then take care of vice mayor.
So
I
moved.
recommend that we affirm the mayor, and I put forth that recommendation.
Second.
Councilmember Atkinson,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
We can have a public comment before we vote.
Oh.
Sorry. Members of the public?
Last chance.
Amber Whitson, Albany resident. I've spent the past year and some going around to everybody who was housed from the bulb directly into housing in the 7.5 years that I lived there. And not one single person who moved from the bulb into housing was assisted by Joanne Weil. Not one. One man received a mattress and some dishes. And the first people housed from the bulb in my time living there got $40 handed to them and a ride from Joanne Weil to Out of the Closet in Berkeley that was said to come from an office collection for them. But I remember at the May 6th City Council meeting in 2013 that part of the reason why Joanne Weil was qualified to advise the City Council to evict the campers and give minimal services is because of her 30 years of experience as a social worker and because of her 7 years housing people from the bulb, which never happened. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker? Okay. We'll vote.
Councilmember Atkinson,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Weil.
Yes. I will then proceed as the serving as the mayor. And you were going to answer the question about the vice mayor position.
Just to have discussion and take care of the mayor first, and then have discussion and take care of the vice mayor next, that's all.
Okay, so now back to my question. Did Councilmember Moss indicate any interest in the vice mayor position? And if he did, could we vote for him?
Yes, you can vote for him.
Do we hear from the public, or do we propose? I mean, do we hear from the public, or otherwise I'll propose, make a proposal?
We can hear from the public.
And that was sort of a question. Is that what we do?
Okay. You know, I guess we should have you the nomination and then a second.
Okay, well,
and then,
I would like to nominate Pete Moss as vice mayor.
okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, and then discussion from the public. Okay, we'll go ahead and vote.
Councilmember Atkinson,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Mayor Weil.
Yes. Okay, so the vice mayor will be Pete Moss. And the next item.
Procedure for filing a city council vacancy. Staff recommendation that the city council review the proposed process for filling the existing city council vacancy in accordance with city charter and authorize the opening of an application period beginning June 17, 2014 and closing June 27, 2014 at 12 p.m. for prospective applicants qualified and interested in serving on the city council.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. With the recent passing of Mayor Peggy Thompson, there currently exists a vacancy on the city council. And as such, according to the city charter, the council is now tasked with filling that vacancy by appointment. The charter further reads that the council has a period of 30 days to fill the vacancy, and if the council is unable to do so for any reason, the mayor has the authority to fill the vacancy for the city council. In terms of the current situation, the 30-day period would expire on July 8th, meaning that it's recommended that the City Council take action as part of your July 7th meeting to appoint an individual to the vacancy. As part of that meeting, we would review applications submitted by the individuals that may be interested in the position, and staff would recommend that the council authorize an application period to begin tomorrow and run through June 27th for those interested in filing for the vacant position. Attached to your staff report this evening, you'll see the draft application. It asks general questions, hoping to gain some basic information regarding prospective candidates as well as their background in local civics. I'd welcome any questions or concerns you have regarding that application, making sure we're asking the right questions.
Just backing up, the date is June 27th, 2014, 12 p.m. Is that midnight?
I'm sorry, that's 12 noon because we are closed on Fridays at 12:30. So hopefully that'll give everyone enough time to submit. Granted, many of these will come in electronically, so that may not be as big of a concern because staff is still in the office. In terms of receiving applications, the city clerk would then be tasked with review of those applications for completeness and also to ensure individuals are both registered voters and residents of the city of Albany in accordance with our city charter for anyone holding elective office here in Albany. Those applications would then be forwarded to the council for review, and they would also be included as part of the packet for the July 7th meeting for the public. Now, in terms of process for the July 7th meeting, we've taken some time to consider this a bit more to make sure that we have a straightforward process for the nomination and appointment. In front of you on the dais and also in the back of the room, we have the City Council appointment process document. It's marked draft, in that it's a working document for your review and comment this evening. I'd like to walk through that with you. This is the result of working with some city clerks who have been through a similar process in the recent past, and also identifying what will hopefully work best for Albany given the constraints of our specific city charter. Again, as part of the July 7th meeting, staff will give you an update on the item and a list of applications received. At that point in time, any questions you may have of staff, and then opening the item up to the applicants themselves to address the council, to express their interest in serving on the council, followed by members of the public wishing to address the council on the matter. After you've heard from the applicants and the public, it's recommended that the council discuss the applications received and identify whether there are any nominees that the council would like to make. Now, this is where things get a little iffy and what if and different scenarios. However, if we receive more than 4 applications, there is the possibility that each individual council member would identify an individual nominee. Now, assuming that those are not overlapping nominees, meaning that more than one council member identifies this interest in the same nominee, there is the potential that we would have 4 nominees. Now, in working through that process to identify one nominee for appointment to the office, we're suggesting the use of a balloting technique. And this is intended to ask the council to vote for a certain number of the total nominees, eliminating the lowest vote getter from each round of the balloting. Again, this would depend on how many total nominees there are. The process would continue, and any tie votes would be subject to the same reballoting to eliminate any ties. It's thought that this would occur for about 3 rounds of balloting, depending again on the total number of nominees, with ultimately if there is any sticking point where the council is unable to break a tie, it could default to the mayor making an appointment, but hopefully, as the council does, working through things in discussion. If at any point in that balloting process a nominee receives 3 or more votes, that indicates a council majority. and at that point in time, the council would be welcome to make that appointment. It's recommended that the appointment is made by resolution, just to make that part of the permanent record. And also, after the appointment is made, it's assumed that the appointee would then begin service on the July 21st meeting after an oath of office ceremony. And then just some details regarding the upcoming election as well. The appointee would serve until the November 4th election, and actually through that election to the certification of that election. We currently, for the general municipal election on November 4th, 2014, have the 2 4-year term seats, which is the standard flip of our 2-year election cycle. Now, with the vacancy, we will also have another race on the ballot, and that will be for a 2-year term, 1 2-year term seat. So individuals interested on running on the city council will need to identify whether they're running for the 4-year term or the 2-year term. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
So just to clarify, the person who fulfills this seat is open to running for any of the positions in the fall. However, let's see, that means, but you're still termed out after 2 terms, so one of the people in the fall who is elected will only be able to serve for 6 years, and 2 will serve for 8 years.
Right.
I have a question. So this is from the county in terms of how we need to run the election for the 2 separate types of seat. So I was sort of thinking, gee, if you have like 3 seats, maybe the 3rd person who gets votes could be that seat, but it doesn't sound like that's written into code that we could do that.
Yeah, no, it's a separate race, and it needs to be a separate race to ensure there is no confusion of the electorate. So it'll, on the ballot, you'll see council member 4-year term, vote for no more than 2. Under that, you'll see council member 2-year term, vote for no more than 1.
I think actually that's a good idea in the sense that you might have someone who's concerned about making a 4-year commitment, but is willing to dip their toe in the water for 2 years, and it gives them an option. So,
Questions, comments from members of the public?
Alan Eckert, Albany resident. I'm also a Charter Review Committee member, but only speaking on behalf of myself. Alan Eckert. Yes. There's a potential that this could come around again, and it's only written confusingly in the charter that the council will have to make up a decision on how to do it every single time, and we only have 30 days to make those decisions sometimes. It could be during the break session when there's actually no meetings at all, and maybe an emergency meeting could be pulled together. So I would suggest considering sending this to the Charter Review Committee as looking into a charter change for rules for adding this, making it more specific for how each person is, because this can be quite confusing, and to do it, within 2 weeks and try to figure out, there's also strategy to go with it for each council member, but there's also strategy for whoever wants to be considered as a nomination. So I think in the future that there needs to be some more in-depth look into how this process is actually run.
Yeah, thank you. Next speaker. Okay, back to the council.
So I have to commend staff for following up on trying to fill in the holes, because there are a lot of holes in the charter. So we are sort of trying to figure it out to be fair and transparent, and by contacting some of the places that unfortunately have had to go through this, I think you've come up with some good ideas. And so, yeah, you're right, it's a short time, and I'm not quite sure whether a longer time is better or not, because we want to get the spot filled. So I figured out how to do that, but hopefully we won't have to do that again. But anyway, thank you for looking into that and coming up with something that I think sounds like it's fair.
I'd just like to add that Alan is working with, what's the name of the teacher at the high school? Kevin James, great high school teacher, because he has 2 students who will be seniors next year who are interested in these ranked choice voting models. And so it's Alan, it's Kevin James, 2 students, and former school board member in Albany, Jim Lindsay, who's now an El Cerrito high school teacher, is a guru in this area. And so we could perhaps, to give these 2 high school kids a project, they might think of some alternative ways to do this in the future. Okay, one quick question now. Let's say hypothetically, in the first round of voting, there's 4 council members, 4 different people. Each of us nominate a separate person, correct? Then each of us gets 3 votes, so there will be a pool of 12 people, and one person could conceivably be in there 4 times. Right now, are 3 choices, are they rank ordered, or do they just go in the pot? Okay, and I'll just say this only because I've been thinking about this because of the activity in town and the interest in it, is that it's possible one person is everybody's 3rd choice and one person is 3 people's 1st choice. So this is a model that kind of can create the election of the least objectionable candidate for the most people, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing for cohesiveness on a council, but it doesn't really get to the candidate who is desired the most by some significant majority. But that's why, these ranked choice models, you can do this stuff forever. But I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion?
Well, I move we approve this city council appointment process as discussed.
Is there a second?
Second. Sorry, I was trying to read on my computer here.
Councilmember
Aye.
Atkinson, Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Mayor Weil.
Yes.
9.3, confirmation of proposed authorized adjustments to local taxes and fees collected on property tax bill. Library Service Act of 1994, Supplemental Library Services Act of 2006, Emergency Medical Services Program, Paramedic Advanced Life Support Tax, 2006 Street Paving and Storm Drain Improvement Tax, and sewer service charges. Staff recommendation that the City Council, 1, determine whether any changes to the recommended rates are desired, and then 2, adopt the resolution number 2014-50, confirming the fiscal year 2014 to 2015 rates to be applied to City of Albany special taxes and fees collected on the annual property tax bill.
Mayor and members of the City Council, this item is intended, again, sort of as the City Clerk just indicated, to document so that there's a resolution and we can sort of begin to track what has occurred with escalators on various fees and special taxes. In this case, a question that Councilmember Barnes had earlier about can you sort of bank that amount? For these taxes and fees, yes, and that's why we're going through the process of having you adopt a maximum adjustment, and then there's a recommended column. What staff is recommending is that both library taxes do not increase. However, the maximum rate is increasing. So again, in the future, if there was that need. And the way we analyzed this was to look at available funds that have been collected, what's proposed as part of the budget to be expended, and is there a need at this time to increase that rate? And that was not the case with that one. With both of the paramedic taxes, we are recommending the full increase, so it's 21 cents a month on one and 3 cents a month on the other. Basically, when it comes to emergency medical services, the fees and charges as well as the special taxes don't cover the full cost, so that's why we're increasing that one. The 2006 street paving and storm drain improvement tax, we are recommending remain at last year's rate and not be increased. And the annual sewer charge, we are recommending be increased, and the dollar increase per month on that one is $2.79, or the equivalent of, and all of those are on single-family homes. And I would just sort of wrap up by saying that the community has been very supportive of funding special needs, and so this is just the next step to make sure that we're transparent in managing those funds and adjusting them when they need to be within the guidelines, or allowing them to continue when it's not needed. Be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. Well, thank you for not going higher on the annual service charge for the sewers by more than a cup of coffee. And that's per month, right? So that seems fair. And then there is a statement here about net assets for the library are projected to increase. It says it's desirable to have a positive balance for cash flow purposes. Is that something we normally do, and do we spend that money, or we just have it in reserve?
So again, it's in a special fund. It can only be used for library services. The last several years, the county contractors, they've actually maintained the current rate, so there hasn't been that need. However, they have announced they're going to be looking at their whole financing structure in the next couple of years. So if those costs change dramatically, you'll be able to, again, absorb that without. The estimated balance at the end of next year, if no increase occurs, is about $230,000. And you're spending close to $750,000 a year.
So we're just being careful for the future, it sounds
Right.
like. Great. Well, thank you very much.
So, Paul, there's 6 items. Do each of these occur as a line item on our property tax bill? Do we know that?
I believe they do.
So we can double check and see what happens.
Yes. And there are people who call and ask. So again, the recommendation would be, and the reason this wasn't on the consent calendar was if the council so chose to make a change in the recommendation, you could do so. But our recommendation would be that the proposed rates be inserted in the approved column and the resolution be adopted.
Is there a motion?
All right. So I recommend that we determine whether there are any changes, and we have not done that, except for what they've already recommended, and then that we adopt the resolution confirming the fiscal year 2014-2015 rates to be applied to City of Albany special taxes and fees collected on the annual property tax bill.
A second.
Comments from members of the public?
I have lots to talk about tonight. Alan Eckert, Albany resident, and this is the one I had the most notes for, too. As I was looking at these, I support the maximum rate increase for the storm drain improvement, the street and storm drain. However, I also support a slight increase, maybe not even up to the maximum, but some increase in storm drain improvement, and a focus on those within the next year. And the reason is such. There is a 70% chance that an El Nino effect will develop over the summer season, and it's an 80% chance over the next fall and winter. And that's from Scientific American, using data from the U.S. National Weather Service and the International Research Institute for Climate and Society at Columbia University. And the reason I suggest that we start putting money into it now is so we can start looking into this infrastructure that we have so that the water flows off the streets, off of our clay, because the water intake is very, very low and minimal when it comes over clay. So it's going to go into these storm drains, and if it doesn't go in the storm drains, it's going to back up and go into our overtaxed sewers, which has an increase in support as well. And if there happens to be not as strong of an undue effect, but it's fairly certain that it will happen. This money could also be used not just for the drains themselves, but could also be diverted for the rain garden stuff that is possibly considered for areas around the city, because it would be a storm drain prevention system to slow it down from going in there. So it doesn't have to be the drains themselves, but it could be used to slow water getting to those drains as part of other improvements. So it could be redirected for very specific purposes like that. The maximum increase is $2.50 per year. That is a 1/3 of 1% increase over taxes from the previous total. That's just for the combined total. And if you only do $2, it's only 1/4%. But that extra money, I think, would really help go a long way if we plan for that, because it's certain that we're going to be hopefully getting more water, but our land just isn't ready to be inundated with water that it can't soak in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perhaps I can shed a little light on that concept. And we did spend some time both with the Public Works Director and the City Manager looking at existing balances. And part of our problem is our crystal ball is broken when it comes to in what year are you going to need a higher percentage than what you may be able to do. So that's why we think banking the percentage makes sense, because there may be a time when you actually need it. Based on last year, the June 30 CAFR, there was $3.9 million available in the street and storm drain improvement fund. So that's a substantial amount of funds. The Public Works Department is underway on implementing the street side of the improvements. They're planning to do a storm drain master plan to identify the improvements and this proper sequence of them shortly, I believe, in next fiscal year, and that is part of the budget. So again, with that type of cash balance available for projects that can't be completed in the next year, at this time, we weren't recommending increasing the street and storm drain tax. The one fee labeled storm drain is not a voter-approved tax, and so that one cannot increase. It's maintained on the books since the time it was imposed at the same rate, and without going through a process. It would take a process, and City Attorney could describe what that would be.
Now, that was the one that was approved in 1992 with no inflation escalator?
I believe that was the case, yes.
Yeah, based on recent court decisions, that would could only be increased by placing, reclassifying it as a special tax, placing it on the ballot, and obtaining a 2/3 voter approval. That's the process that would be required to increase that that particular fee.
Okay. Anything else from council? No. Is there a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. You're correct. We can vote.
Councilmember Atkinson?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Mayor Weil?
Yes. Okay, that's unanimous.
9.4, approving an update to the 2014-2015 operating budget and appropriating funds. Staff recommendation, one, that council adopt resolution number 2014-59, adopting the update to the City of Albany operating budget for fiscal year 2014 to 15 and authorize appropriations. 2, that council adopt resolution number 2014-58, adopting the updated salary schedule for city employees. 3, that the Albany Municipal Service Joint Powers Authority Board of Directors adopt resolution number JPA 2014-5, adopting the updated salary schedule for management and confidential employees.
Members of the City Council, I'm glad to bring before you, although you probably weren't as glad to receive it, the proposed update to the 2014-15 operating budget. I'm hoping just to have a brief, hopefully brief presentation that highlights some things both that are in the report as well as just some high-level things that are not necessarily portrayed in the staff report. Peel away a few layers, explain why we are approaching some things the way we are, and then at the end as well allow an opportunity for department heads who have proposed initiatives to have an opportunity to sort of give you the reasoning and input they had into those. So please feel free to jump in at any point. So we're going to talk first with the current year estimated results. Talked a little bit, as I said, about the changes in the format and why we did it. And we're presenting sort of two versions of the budget. One is a status quo, what we call a base budget. And then there's the recommended budget, which has initiatives added to the base budget. Talking first off about the year that's going to end in another week or so here. The general fund expenditures are estimated to be in balance. We're actually projecting that we will wind up with some additional funds that are going to be used or proposed to be placed into reserves. And the reason we're encountering this is, in general, the improved economy, sales tax, property tax. You hear that on the news, and it's coming true both in the region as well as here locally. This is the first full year of the local Albany sales tax. In the prior year, it went into effect in April, and so you only had 1 quarter that you were collecting that tax. There have been some expenditure savings this year. I realize that's one time, which is why we're saying put some one-time money into reserves based on turnover. And primarily that occurs in the fire and police equipment reserves, where we've recommended increases, but we've also recommended 2 new reserves, one for information systems and one for future playground renovation. And the concept with these types of reserves is you may not have the money to do everything today, but if over time you can sock away a little bit of money, it'll make it a little less painful when you have to make the choice and you get to do something fun. That wasn't the information systems piece, that was the playground piece. So I know the volume of detail, paper, et cetera, was probably larger than what you may have seen in the past. And again, just to share a little bit about why we're changing the focus. And the best way is to just give a real quick snapshot of what is fund accounting, which is what cities operate with. And we have separate funds, and you have a gas tax fund that's separate from your general fund. And what that means in sort of layman's term is it would be as if you had a separate checkbook. And if there was a gas tax expense, you'd write it out of that checkbook. And if it was a general fund expense, you'd write it out of another one. So in the past, sort of the approach used was to try instead and focus on all operating expenditures and put them all in the general fund, and then transfer in major amounts from other funds into the general fund. And what I'd like to sort of suggest that looks like with my family budget is my 23-year-old son who, yeah, Dad, I'll pay the car insurance, but you write it out of your checkbook, and at the end of the year, I'll transfer a bunch of money to you well, I'm not sure that I could easily know, does he still have the money? How much money does he still have? Where are we at on all this? So again, it just makes, although it's more complex, makes it simpler to try and keep track of expenditures in the fund that they're occurring. And that's basically all we're doing. Does result in a little more detail. The impacts are, it makes it easier for us to know if it's a gas tax expenditure, what it was for. Does it make sense when we're trying to review and close the books? If it's written for asphalt, that's probably a pretty good indication that they were doing patching, and that's a gas tax expense. It also will improve visibility of funds to the departments. When your public works director is trying to plan his capital projects, he needs to know how much money's left in the gas tax fund without saying, okay, and then I have to remember that really I'm spending in this fund, so I have to subtract that amount from a different fund. It just is kind of unnecessary complications. It'll allow the council to make proactive adjustments if that's needed. And then lastly, I would just suggest as a best practice, you get your comprehensive annual financial report, which has some level of detail to it. But that's all after the fact. When you get yours this year on time, it'll be probably in December. There isn't much you can do at that point. So your budget, which should be your plan, should have a similar level of detail, or at least the ability to find out what is funding your operating expenses. As I indicated, we presented a base budget, which is status quo in terms of services provided. The 14-15 base budget is sort of a foundation base. We took what was adopted last July by the council and then updated it based on what trends we were seeing both on the expense side and the revenue side. Most of the expenditure requirement or adjustments were relatively minor. We did do some significant changes or updating of personnel allocations. So in the Public Works, sorry to beat on you all night, in the Public Works Department with 6 people in the field, they're allocated between parks and streets and trees and sewer. So it was a good time now that Public Works has had about 18 months up and running in their current form to actually go back and review how we were allocating all of the bodies to the different aspects of services they provide. So when we cranked through all those numbers. The bottom line was there was a positive variance. There was additional funds available to recommend some additional appropriations as part of your update to the budget, and that was about $351,000. So the way we've structured it is to refer to initiatives. These were developed and sort of herded by the city manager based on input I know from the council and their goals and things that the city wants to see accomplished. In terms of looking at what would best meet additional services to the public or improve services. In addition, in each case, there are deductions. So if we added a position, we might have taken away some part-time hours or taken away some consulting services in order to balance. As well, some of the positions, mostly but not all in Public Works, involve more than one fund. So they aren't just general fund expenditures. In terms of looking at all funds, revenue, and expenses, I just note that there's still some work to be done. We still have some capital funds that are showing in there in terms of sewer, for example. A big piece of the sewer fee actually goes for capital improvements. So in the future, that may be sort of split a piece into operating and the rest into the capital fund so that it'll be easier to track. This isn't anywhere else, and I'll go through it relatively quickly. If you take all funds, you can see that the general fund makes up about 63%, so that is the biggest one, and that is why we spend all the time focusing on the general fund, but that's not the only fund. In addition, if you look at expenditures by program, and what we've done here is combined police and fire, and you can see it's almost half of the total program expenditures. Not unexpected, not unique among cities. If you looked at the expenditures in terms of what are they funding, about 2/3 is salaries and benefits. So again, this is just to give you a sense of what it takes to provide quality services and at I think, a very good level. Now, digging down one level deeper and actually looking at the general fund, you can see on the revenue side, the two big layers there are sales tax and property tax.
Quick question. Our transfer tax, because we're a charter city, we have more flexibility to change our transfer tax. That's my understanding. Where does that show up in here?
It's actually in other taxes. Sorry. It's a little over $1 million.
It's, in other words, it's 9% with all other?
No, other taxes, the green, 23%.
23%, okay.
Or yellow, I guess.
So it's a big chunk of, well, I would call that baby something, but never mind. It's a big chunk of that yellowish green color.
Yes. Other taxes include business license tax, which is about $580,000, property transfer tax, about $1.2 million, racetracks tax, about $260,000, and approximately $1.6 million in the utility user tax. So actually, the utility user tax is the largest share of that category.
And that's the bill on cell phones and telephones,
Gas and electric.
gas and electric.
Looking at general fund expenditures, in this case, we split out police and fire. And as well, just a reminder, this is general fund expenditures. So in the case of fire, the Emergency Medical Services Fund is funding part of that. So this isn't the whole cost of fire. On to the recommended initiatives. All recommended regular staffing are presented in the personnel allocation plan that was an appendix to the recommended budget. And I'll go through them briefly, and then as I indicated, some of the department directors are going to address them. Adding a full-time dispatcher, establishing the public safety community engagement specialist as a regular position. In the public works side, the council had already taken action on a reorganization, and so this budget funds 3 positions in that area. In-house development of plan checking, the addition of a financial analyst in finance, which also is because of the nature of public works, and this position is going to be dealing with reporting, capital improvement, grants. It actually is part of the whole package to support public works and move them along as identified in the plan. And then 2 recreation coordinators, 1 on senior programs and another on general programs. Overall, we're presenting a balanced budget, still able to contribute some amounts to the public safety equipment reserves as were identified in the original adopted 2015 budget, additional staff to address key community needs, and this provides sort of also a foundation for the capital budget that will need to be updated and brought back to you separately. We did want to note that although not called out in any one place, there are several places, both within the operating budget and within current capital plans, where expenditures support the climate action plan. That would include funding the cost sharing of sidewalk repairs, safe routes to school program, creek restoration, waterfront park vegetation management, Albany Hills open space improvements and trails. And then on the capital side, several projects that we noted were Pierce Street Park improvements, the design of Buchanan Phase 3, including bike and pedestrian improvements, improved traffic and pedestrian circulation, wayfinding signs and curb ramps, and various street rehab projects that will provide improved striping for bicycles. See, that wasn't so bad, was it? Whew.
I mean, it's very impressive how you've organized everything. I think we'd all have to agree on that.
So what I'd like to do is allow the department directors to come up. Certainly, if after that you have any questions that you need me to answer, I'd be more than happy to. And the recommended action is that take input from the public as well as yourselves and adopt the resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. I am Mike McQuiston, the Chief of Police. I'm told I have about 3 minutes to get this done here, so let me jump right into it. The budget initiatives and recommended funding before the Council tonight includes funding to reinstate the 6th Public Safety Dispatcher position in the Police and Fire Communications Center. And this position originally, the position existed and we allowed it to run vacant in an attempt to balance the city budget back in 2011 when we had a retirement of a senior dispatcher. We just left the position unfilled. So we seek to fill that. When the 6th dispatch position is funded, a number of benefits are realized. We were able to recoup some of the degradation in services that we experience when we operate the call center with only 5 dispatchers, which is what we have now. We get faster call answering times. We get fewer missed calls. We have been able to document there have been a few calls to our 911 center that have not been answered before the caller hung up. We increase safety for our police and fire personnel because the dispatchers are the link to what they're doing in the field, and the more dispatchers we have, the less overtime they're working, the shorter their shifts tend to be, and it's better all the way around. It allows us to do more training, to improve their efficiency, and deliver better service to the public safety personnel. What we're able to do with the 6th dispatcher is more than double what we call our double coverage in the dispatch center. Right now, under the schedule that we're able to put together with 5 dispatchers, we only have about 30 hours or so of double coverage when we have more than one dispatcher in the communication center. And this allows us to go up to 76 hours a week of double coverage, which is really important if you have more than one thing happening. And frequently in there's a lot more than one thing happening at a time. There's a long list of other benefits that come from that, and I don't have the time to get into them. They are included in the report that you have in front of you. The budget recommendations tonight also include establishing the community engagement specialist as a permanent part-time position. I think most members of council know the good work done by our community engagement specialist, Karina Tyndall, who just celebrated 5 years of part-time employment with the city. This position is a specially trained employee who can quickly go into neighborhoods and identify issues around which neighborhoods can organize. In doing so, the community engagement specialist nurtures neighborhood networks, is kind of what we use to describe it. This position is part-time. It was originally authorized by council back in 2008 in response for a need for neighborhood-based organizing for disaster preparedness, and I jumped on that for crime prevention purposes. I wanted to start a neighborhood watch program and some other initiatives, and council was gracious enough to fund it back then. Since that time, the position has been reviewed and replaced into each annual budget. Like I said, we're celebrating 5 years with this position. Establishing the community engagement specialist as a permanent part-time position was listed among the city's 2010 to 2012 objectives. However, no formal action was ever taken to establish this as a permanent position, and so we just continue to fund it, and that's what we seek to do tonight. I'm over my 3 minutes. I'm also available for any questions that should come up about this.
Michael?
So, the 76 hours, would those be on weekend evenings typically?
Oh, now you've thrown me one I'm not prepared to answer. It's been a few years since we were on that schedule. Typically, they're evening hours and day shift, which is when we get most of the calls.
So most of the calls are during the day, not
Days and the swing shift hours.
okay.
So if your question is, will they be on the Friday and the Saturday nights? I'm not sure, but I suspect yes.
Now, my understanding was that you have in the past actually had to pull a police officer off the street sometimes to man or to person the dispatcher desk.
We have to staff the 911 center with police officers either on overtime, or if we have more than a minimum number on the street, we'll pull someone off the street and have them work in dispatch, yes.
So this will mean better dispatch service, in some cases, more police officers on the street, and reduction in overtime.
Definitely, yes.
Okay. Oh, one last quirky question. I'm sorry. Man, I have all these piles of papers here. Hang on. Requests for information. It says that we will be able to process requests for information more quickly from, God, I just had it.
Probably from members of the Public Records Act requests.
Thank you. Yes, public records. So do the dispatchers do that?
Yes, this is one of the, probably one of the unknowns or kind of unstated about the position is they're not the stereotypical dispatcher sitting and waiting for the next hot call to come in. That when they're not working that, they're a critical part of our support staff. So they're processing Public Records Act requests for information, typically the lower level ones that don't involve a lot of legal issues, so copies of accident reports, things of that sort. Insurance companies notify us that they've paid off an insured and they're now the owner of a piece of property. And there's lots of records work that they do in a support capacity when they have the time. Having double coverage, the more double coverage we have, the more of that work can get done as well. And so we're able to respond to those requests a lot faster, more efficiently. There's a whole host of collateral duties besides public safety dispatch that they do. They also staff the public service counter 24/7. So we have a 24-hour public service counter in the police department where anyone can come in any day, any time, doesn't matter. And those dispatchers are the person. It's the place, I say, where you can always either come down and talk to a city employee, and it doesn't matter what day of the year it is, or whether it's a national holiday or not, or you can call and talk to a city employee 24/7, 365, and that is that city employee that they get.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, they should have a counseling degree too, because if you can talk to them any time, sounds like, who knows? This is one of the things that we were unhappy to have to do several years ago, and it's really nice to see that we can put it back before I leave in some ways, because we went through a really bad time. So this is very exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next department head.
Shelley Putzer, I am the Recreation and Community Services Director, I guess officially tonight. So
Congratulations.
my first day on the job. Hey, thank you. It's always hard to follow police because, you know, they can say that people are in danger, but we keep kids off the street, so we'll start with that. If we talk about what we lost, on paper, we can talk about the fact that we did lose a 3/4 KALB coordinator in our cable channel, but we also had 2 positions that were frozen during 2008 in our effort to help balance the budget. But if you go beyond that, when we started to figure out ways, you know, our fearless leader, Penelope, led by example by taking on additional work, and we all stepped up as well in our department because we have a very talented department who can do many things. And as we started to do that, we started to see some of our supervisors take on other jobs outside of the department and pulling them away from their core functions. Isabel, as you know, has taken on a big chunk of the human services, and that has pulled her away from the senior center. In my position, I took on a lot of the work from the 2 coordinators. We passed it on to other coordinators in the department, but I took on all of the special events, as you know, and the city's website, which happened at that same time, and city branding. And then we made a shift in teen services, and Jeremy, who is multi-talented, went into an IT media role and also had to cover that loss of the 3/4 position. At the same time this is happening, people during the recession in that time stayed home and used our services. Our numbers increased, our operations increased, the amount of facility rentals and programs and classes increased. And so our core coordinators are really handling those basic services, and they're overloaded with just the basics. So it left some huge gaps. So tonight we're coming to you to talk about adding a position in the senior center as a coordinator, and also in the recreation in the community center, doing special events and reinstating our volunteer program. All vital services that the city needs. just to scare you, I can scare you by baby boomer numbers. By 2015, the baby boomers that will be 50 and older will make up 45% of the U.S. population. That's 2015. And so when we have a senior center that has lost Isabel to do day-to-day operations and lead trips and programs and classes, and then we see an increase in the number of people utilizing those services, we have a huge gap. And although we've been extremely efficient in the 6 years, I think we've got it down to a pretty good system for how we can keep things growing and also keep up the level of services. We've just run out of people. There isn't enough people to do the work that's coming to us. In the community service department, we lost our volunteer program due to budget cuts. We lost a dedicated person in that, which I felt was one of those programs that's really needed because it helps the city staff in a number of ways. One thing is our Friends of Albany Parks, which we can get people out there working in our parks to help the city maintenance staff, which is a very important program. As we bring back the Albany Greenway and add a Pierce Street Park, we're going to need more volunteers and more people to help coordinate those volunteers. Our volunteerism has gone down, but not because people don't want to volunteer. We just don't have a dedicated staff person to lead that. We bring back our middle school volunteer program, which is a valuable program for middle school students, and we're starting a junior park rangers, which is for youth park stewardship program, which will be pretty great for the city. So in addition to the city events, which is always like everything's just the fun part, but it actually takes a lot of time and coordination. And I can say that the biggest compliment that a Recreation and Community Services Department has is that every time we do a community input process and people talk about why they love the city, our programs are always one of the #1 reasons why people love the community. So that's what I have for you tonight. Any questions for me?
No, thank you very much. You've done a great job. And I like, because, I've had contact with the seniors in particular. I really like the idea of having somebody back in there and making sure the programs are, working and have a really good outreach. Because a lot of times people don't really know what you have to offer. Even though we feel like we get the word out, it's almost like a campaign. They still need to hear it again and again. So I think that sounds great. Yeah.
So, quick question. So, after 2008, you lost FTEs, but because more people were hanging around town, your demand for services went up. So, once all these initiatives kick in, are you going to be back where you were in terms of, I don't know, some sort of FTEs per services required benchmark? You're going to be above that, below that?
I don't know. Go ahead.
I would say that's a yes for that department, because even though we lost the 0.75 to KALB, Jeremy has slid over and is doing that almost full time in addition to some of his IT. He also has a knack for IT. So I would say that gap was able to be filled to pretty much entirely. The 2 recreation coordinators, though, those were the other 2s that were left. So I would say from a frontline worker position, absolutely.
Okay.
Good, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Next department head.
Hello, Tina McKinney, Finance Services Director. I don't know if I can follow that exciting presentation with numbers, but they are essential nonetheless. And it is the Finance Department's desire to comply with the GFOA, or Government Finance Officers' recommended best practices regarding the protection of public assets, as well as compliance with monitoring requirements. In addition, there is a current need to improve the structure of work systems and operational procedures. Examples of recent areas of improvement to date include you're now receiving the quarterly reporting of general fund revenue and expenditures. We've implemented a grants policy, and as is presented to you tonight by Paul Rankin, an updated and detailed 2014-15 budget that incorporates a revised budget format to reflect appropriations in all funds. As the complexity of municipal finance in areas such as grant monitoring requirements have increased, a financial analyst will be beneficial to research and analyze results on an ongoing basis, as well as provide a much-needed resource to staff to effectively maintain these improvements and successfully accomplish priority objectives in areas of budget development and management. Effective monitoring of budget variances for compliance with established goals and objectives, and most importantly, improved timeliness in financial reporting. In the past, the city has had to augment budget preparation and other analyst-level tasks with temporary and contracted services. By adding a financial analyst, the finance department will significantly diminish the need for temporary and contracted services, as well as improve services to department staff and help to reduce overtime in the finance department. As it is important for departmental staff to have financial information on a timely and regular basis to properly monitor their programs to ensure audit and financial reporting compliance, this position would be essential in providing that information, as well as working with staff regarding budget monitoring. Most notably, with the planned expansion of the Public Works Department, the analyst will be a key asset in facilitating the preparation of the capital improvement and long-term financial plans, as well as provide more efficient monitoring and tracking of grants, contracts, and purchase orders citywide. The addition of an analyst will allow staff to be proactive rather than reactive to audit findings and facilitate in the need to modernize the department and undertake key priority tasks such as the financial system upgrade to integrate permits and licenses, as well as effectively utilize purchase orders, along with incorporating best practices regarding asset management and encumbrance and payroll accounting. Finally, a financial analyst will be beneficial to research and analyze results on an ongoing basis, as well as provide a much-needed resource to city departments. Overall, this position will result in effectively achieving the goal of improving financial efficiencies and systems citywide. And with that, I am open to any questions you may have.
So you'll be hiring someone in the next several months?
Depending on what the council says tonight, we would hope to as soon as possible. I know timely financial reporting is a big issue, and that's something we want to get started with immediately.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, council members. For the Community Development Department, a little bit of the historical context. Until 2010, we had 2 full-time planners. Through attrition, one position was open, and we've been doing quite well with just one planner. What we're proposing for your consideration this evening is a change in how we process building permits, and to basically diversify and expand our in-house capacity. And it really addresses, I think, our most significant customer service need right now. The position is called a plan check engineer. This is a registered engineer who would be responsible for reviewing plans, building permit application plans for compliance with the California Building Code. It's a very technical field, and it's a mandate of state law that we do this. Historically, the city has used outside consultants to do this, which has its pros and cons, but in our case, what we're finding is the volume of work right now is increasing, so what would take normally 1 to 2 weeks is starting to take 2 to 4 weeks. And on our end, the management of that process is getting more and more complex because we're kind of the intermediary in the conversations between the applicants and the engineers. So we're sending mail and emails back and forth, and it just is getting quite complex for us. What we'd like to propose is to have an in-house, as most cities do, an in-house plan check engineer that would be responsible for doing this technical analysis. We would pass on the cost to the applicants, as we do now. The consultants that we use, we pass on that cost. We would continue to pass on the cost where possible. And as the other departments have talked about, there are other duties that come up in every department, and in our department, you'll see me out in the front counter next week doing building permits because we're going to be a little short-staffed. This person can also help with a variety of things like that. I could envision them helping at the front counter, but also with, say, code enforcement or as a backup inspector. There's a range of things that this person can help with. And again, collaborating with our colleagues in the fire department and the public works department, which is just part of what we're doing all the time anyhow. So again, this is an opportunity, we think, to really improve the way we do our work, and that the experience that our customers have will go a little bit better and faster.
So this will make your life and Ann's life easier. That was my main question.
Thank you for your consideration of that. Yes, I think it will make everyone's life easier. I think it's, we work as a team, and to have someone there who's got the technical expertise to answer questions would be a big help.
And a quick one on code enforcement. I know this was a real issue because when I was campaigning, I encountered a woman who lived across the street from a house that had been derelict for years, and finally there was some code enforcement and it got fixed up, and she was so happy.
Yeah.
So is that an issue? Will we be able to pick up on code enforcement in dealing with derelict properties?
I hope so. It depends on the skill set of the particular individual. A larger city would have a dedicated code enforcement program with code enforcement professionals. There's a whole certification program that you can go through to do that. We don't have a person who does that, and I'm not asking for that this evening. That would be wonderful someday, but that's something that we do, and we triage the cases that we take on, and we're taking on the ones that are the biggest impact on the quality of life, or there's real life safety things. I would imagine that a person who's doing this would be qualified to do much of that for us, but it to some degree depends on the particular qualifications of the particular person that comes in.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, that's all right. We discussed public works before. Members of the public, questions?
I'm Bob Erhammer, Albany resident, 745 Pear Street. I think the budget as presented by the directors and the people here is very good. I'm quite pleased with it, particularly the funding of new positions, which I think will help streamline things and help the city operate more smoothly. I'm particularly pleased, on a personal note, to see Pear Street Park mentioned as a line item in it. I'm also a member of the Sustainability Committee, and I saw the Carbon Action Plan, or Climate Action Plan mentioned in it, which I really like. And also, one thing I've noticed is the building permits to get a plan check engineer, I think is very good. Because I remember when I went through the process of remodeling my home, it took 9 months from the time we submitted the plans to the time we got the final approval. We were able to go down and get the permits. And I'd like to see anything done to be able to speed that up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, Alan Eckert, Albany resident. I was also a member of the inaugural Albany Civics Academy class, and there was something that reminded me of a tactic that Army recruiters do is they have a bunch of photos up on the wall, and they have one empty slot for that person they're trying to recruit in there. When we went to each department, and was this 2012, 2011, 2012? When we went to each department, we really got to see all the people that were there, but it was a point to be made of all the places, the spots that were not there, and they could really see that could be used to improve. And with the city trying to look into increased housing density, that's increased people, increased need for services, increased finances coming in, so we'd have to figure out how to balance that out. So it heartens me to see a balanced budget and being able to fill these spots again. And I strongly encourage that we do add some more meat to the gears that we have going on in this city to keep it strong. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Peggy McQuaid, Albany resident. Just to echo what other people have said, it's really nice to see that the staff levels are starting to at least come back to where they were several years ago. It's been really hard, I think, on staff to have so few of them. I do wonder, though, if there was any consideration, I know we talked about Public Works, or you talked about Public Works several months ago, but in increasing the actual number of positions of, and I'm not sure what the right term is, it's the people that are actually doing the work out in the streets, out in the parks and everywhere, the actual boots on the ground, for lack of a better term. You know, as we're increasing what we're doing, we're increasing some of our parks, there's more work to be done. I hope there's some consideration in adding to the number of people that we have in that department on that level, besides on the higher up levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I'm Susan Reeves, 739 Pierce Street. I'm very happy that after 25 years, Pierce Street Park is on the budget to more than just improvements, I think, to get it started. And it's taken, as Bob said, probably about 25 years of work, work that was inspired by someone who won't be able to see the fruits of the labor. I think it makes me more determined than ever to get it across the finish line and actually see it and partake of the park. So please make sure that there is adequate funding. She was my cheat sheet, so I couldn't really see where it is in the capital budget, but please make sure it's adequate. And I love the idea of volunteer. I think there's a lot of us that are ready, willing, and able to get the park done. And thank you again.
Thank you. Back to the City Council. Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, may I make one statement since we have longtime Pierce Street Park supporters here? As you saw it in the budget, but we will be coming back. The 100% plans are being worked on now, so we hope to get those back to Council through Park and Rec and to Council hopefully in September. And what will be coming up in the next budget item is our lighting and landscaping districts, and we have identified the balance of funds that we needed to fully implement Phase 1.
Thank you.
May I have 5 minutes of Paul's time to ask some further questions? I promise I'll be brief. 5 minutes?
If you would be brief, thank you.
Okay, the sewer fund, I take it because we used to dump money from the sewer fund back into the general fund at the end of the year. I noticed that when I first came here. That must not be a restricted fund.
It is. It's an enterprise fund. Yes, it's restricted, and so is all we're showing in expenditures in the operating budget is the portion of operating expenditures. So any major sewer line rehab work is not in this budget, but there is a sewer department budget, if you will, funded, I believe, entirely by sewer service fees.
Okay, so in the report here, there are still a lot of transfers in and out of the general fund, and the gist of what you had told us is that you are going to try to eliminate those. So if we see this type of report 2 years from now, will these items be gone? No.
So there are some situations where it doesn't make sense. So the transfers into the general fund include the pension tax, which pays a portion of the public safety PERS costs. And so again, it would be a little awkward to try and expense only their retirement cost in a different fund. So in that case, a transfer makes sense. The other transfers are actually more likely to be transfers out. So in other words, we're taking in next year's budget $24,000 and transferring it to future fire equipment replacement reserves, and $45,600 we're transferring out to fund future police equipment reserves. The other transfers you probably won't see again. It was a matter of balancing the budget and looking at some of the initiatives, and we had some special situations dealing with the financial analyst position. So that one will go away, where we will actually charge that position directly. And as well, one of the recreation positions was funded by a separate fund. But at the time, please understand, these are lots of linked worksheets all together. It was simpler for presentation purposes by that point, just to show it as a transfer.
Okay, quick question. It says here, a non-departmental expense of $127,000 was included in the estimate to begin proactively recognizing the cost of retiree medical benefits. Of course, those costs have been a real problem for some cities. So you can just give me a paragraph on that to ease my mind?
So the problem here is much less because the contribution towards retirees is capped at the PERS minimum. So rather than having millions and millions of dollars of liability, I believe the city's liability was around $1 million. What the $127,000 reflects is what in the current year would be the scheduled assumed payment. In the next year's budget, it's less in the 14-15. So that was an amount we're putting away in the current year.
Okay, last question. We've had, wage increases scheduled going forward in our SEIU Fire and Police Department labor agreements. We just lost $150,000 in revenue that was going to be dedicated for the Public Works Center, and we talked, and Measure F, it turns out, is bringing in $1 million a year, but that will stop in 2020. So my question is, do we do any kind of multi-year projections? I meant to check the CAFR before I came in, but I didn't. So I want to get a sense, is there a 2-year or 4-year projection?
Not as part of the CAFR, but I think that is something that Tina has in her sort of plans for the future and wants to do more of that to make sure that you aren't biting off more than you can chew long term as well. Certainly, some of the current vacancies had allowed the city manager to do some restructuring and changes of duties and what department does that. And my expectation is, knowing Penelope, that as future opportunities present themselves, she's pretty good at thinking outside the box and may come with a different look on things, again, with that goal of controlling costs.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Is there a motion?
Okay, let's see if I can find, okay, I will make a motion that the council adopt resolution number 2014-59, adopting the update to the City of Albany operating budget for fiscal year 2014-15 and authorize appropriations. 2, that council adopt resolution 2014-58, adopting the updated salary schedule for city employees. And 3, that the Albany Municipal Services Joint Powers Authority Board of Directors adopt resolution number JPA 2014-5, adopting the updated salary schedule for management and confidential employees.
Second?
Second.
Okay. I'm going to poll people.
Councilmember Atkinson?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Mayor Weil?
Yes. Okay, that passes unanimously. Next item.
Other business reports on meetings attended, announcement of events and future agenda.
I would like to thank Paul very much for putting us in good shape, because even though we seem to have been doing okay, this really gives us an idea of where all the little details of our budget are that we really didn't always know about. So I'm very confident going forward that the city's in good shape in terms of where its next steps are going to be, and I just can't thank you enough for all the hard work you've put in. So thank you.
Second that. Anything about meetings? Well, the meeting is adjourned then.